Namaskar. Welcome to the class of Educational Psychology. Today we are going to study about the education psychology, the meaning and definition of education psychology, the nature of educational psychology, the process, the different methods of studying education psychology, the various implications of education psychology, and what is the use of education psychology for a teacher and for our students. Let us request me to recall the name of favorite teacher whichever you have studied. Friends, if you recall the name of your favorite teacher, you would think that the various qualities of that favorite teacher. A favorite teacher has a characteristic to make a complex thing very simple. The way of presentation of a good teacher is that he present in such a manner that a student not feel any burden, heaviness in his or her class. What is the reason behind it? That friends, the reason is that the teacher, he or she knows the principal theories of educational psychology, and that person, the teacher, implies those theories in the classroom. They understand the mental condition of the students. They understand what a student like and not and dislike. The teacher can give a proper presentation in class with the help of the various methods of education psychology. Here we are in this lecture, we are going to study about the meaning of educational psychology. The educational psychology word is comprised of two words. One is education, another is psychology. First, we will try to understand what is the meaning of psychology. Generally, we know the psychology is the study of the behavior. The psychology, if we go through the history of psychology, earlier psychology comes from the discipline of the philosophy. In psychology, the first meaning which was given by the various psychologists is that psychology is the study of soul. The psychology words is derived from the Greek words. There are two words, psyche and logos. There are two different words. The meaning of psyche is the soul, P-S-C-H-E, psyche is soul, and logos is the science or the study. That means the psychology is the study of science or the science of soul, but that was not accepted. Why? Because soul is something which is metaphysical thing. It cannot be seen. Soul cannot be seen. It's an abstract thing. It cannot be observed, cannot be touched, and cannot make a scientific experiments. We cannot make a scientific experiment on soul, and there is no clear picture about the soul. So that was discarded during the 18th century. The meaning of that psychology, that this is the science of soul. The next in 19th century, the next thing is come. The psychology was understood as the science of mind. The second, we are talking about the history. That the psychology was first accepted as a science of soul, but second, it's science of mind. But the mind is also not very clear. Many things are in the mind is not very clear. So that in 1892, William James defined that psychology is the science of mental processes. So the ambiguity of this word mind also discarded the meaning of psychology as this is the science of soul, science of mind or study of the mind. There was a confusion regarding the nature and function of the mind. Then the next thing is come about in modern psychologists define psychology as the science of consciousness. In the psychology, we study the consciousness, the overt behavior, but the behavior of any individual is not only due to this consciousness. There are various other implications which are the results of subconscious mind and which are also the result of unconscious mind. So this all other things are exist: consciousness, unconscious, and subconscious. Therefore, due to this different level, this not comprehensively define the psychology. Hence, this again the meaning of this meaning of science, that science of consciousness is psychology, is again described. And thus psychologist thinks that the psychology first lost its soul, then its mind, and that is consciousness. And ultimately, at present, only the behavior exists. Therefore, we can say that in our time, the most accepted meaning of psychology is the study of the behavior. If we talk in terms of the William McDowell in 1905, defined psychology as the science of behavior. W.B. Pillsbury in 1911 said that, and J.P. Watson in 1912 also defined psychology as the science of behavior. And behavior, what is behavior? Friends, all the activities, overt activities of any individual which we observe, that is the behavior of any individual. And when the science of this behavior is the psychology. The behavior generally means overt activities which can be observed and measured. Therefore, science of behavior and experiences on human being is the psychology. That is, this meaning of psychology is given by B.F. Skinner. So we can say that psychology is the study of human behavior and human relationship. The science of human behavior and human relationship is the psychology. And why this is connected with education? And in education, in narrow meaning, we can say that education is the modification of behavior or the development of the behavior. And in psychology is the study of human behavior. So both this psychology and education are correlated with each other. The second important term in education psychology is education. What is education? The first question will come in front of us. What is education? Dear learners, please see the meaning of education. In narrow meaning, we say that education is a way of developing skills, attitude, knowledge in any individual for desirable goals, desirable habits that we develop. The process of developing the knowledge, skills, value, attitude is education. This is the general layman meaning of education. In the process of education, we try to shape the behavior of young children for what? For their harmonious adjustment within the society and to achieve the goals, the desirable goals set up by the philosophy. So this is the education. Education is a process. If we see the etymologically, the word education is derived from the Latin word educare. Educare is a word from which the education word is derived. The meaning of educare, the educare is refers to the bring up or to nourish. To bring up or to the nourish the child's mental, child's physical, child's social, the overall development of a child, to nourish the development, to bring up, to brought up. These are the meaning of educare in the Latin. Another word of Latin is educere, means to bring forth or to drag out. Another means refers to take out the innate capabilities of any individual. The inside the potentiality of any individual is the educere, is the word of the Latin that means that the process to bring out the inside capabilities, inside potentials of any individual is education. Let us see another etymological meaning of education. Education is the word made up of two letters. One is E. The Latin word educatum. The Latin word is educatum, from where this education is derived. The E implies a movement from inward to outward. That means to drag out from inward to outward. And duco refers to developing or progressing. Duco is that means the inside capabilities, potentials, powers, to take out this potential and powers from the individual to the outside. The overall process is known as education according to this Latin meaning. And education, what is the aim of education? If we see the aims of education, at providing a learner or a child a nourishing environment to bring out and develop the latent potentiality hidden inside him. So whatever the latent potentialities which are hidden inside any individual, to take out them outside, that process is known as education. So friends, let us discuss some more point about the education. By education, some great peoples, I am going to quote here the lines of some great peoples. Mahatma Gandhi, our father of nation, said about the education that education, I mean an all-round drawing out of the best in the child's and man's body, mind and spirit. According to the Mahatma Gandhi, education is development of body, mind and soul. And to take out the best from the body, mind and spirit is education. That was the word by Mahatma Gandhi. What Bapu said about this meaning of education. Education is development of soul. What is the meaning of soul here? He is talking about the spiritual development. The development of body is talking about the physical development. Development of the mind is more conscious here, concentrated about the cognitive development of any individual. So, the overall development is the education. Mahatma Gandhi said that cognitive, affective, psychomotor, all these three domains develop together for the harmonious adjustment of any individual is education. In word of Rousseau, Rousseau is a naturalist philosopher. He said education is the child's development from within. And what is within inside the child, the development of those things is education. If we see the words of the Plato, education develops in the body and soul of the people all the beauty and all the perfection he is capable of. And whatever all the beauty and the capabilities of any individual, to manifestation of those beauties and capabilities is education. If we see, the human personality has a different facets like physical, mental, social and spiritual. There are different domains. The development of all those facets, all those different domains is education. It is a task of education to ensure harmonious and balanced development of these innate power of an individual by providing a nurturing and conducive environment for their growth and development. This is the education. Friends, now if we understand, I hope you understand about the meaning of psychology and the meaning of education. If you understand both the meanings, now you can able to give me the definition of education psychology. Let us see here what is educational psychology. Education psychology is the applied branch of psychology in an education setting. There are various branches of psychology, and education psychology is one of the branch of the applied psychology. Here, it implies the application of principles and practices of psychology to the various dimensions of education with a view to modify the behavior in an education environment. What education psychology does? It applies the principles, theories of psychology in the process of education for the purpose of modification of behavior of the individual or of the child. Education psychology is the study of those facts and principles of psychology which help to explain and improve the process of education. This is one of the famous definition of education psychology given by W.B. Kolsenik. That, what is the meaning of this definition? Please ponder your attention here. Friends, the education psychology is study of facts, principles of psychology which help to explain and improve the process of education. That means, if you want to improve the process of education, the process of teaching, learning, the process of adjustment, the process of mental health of child, if we are using here the principles of psychology, that the whole branch of applied psychology is known as education psychology. The general psychology is a pure science, and education psychology its applications in the field of education with the aim of socializing an individual and modifying his behavior. Please see some more points about the education psychology. The education psychology deals with the behavior of human beings in education situations. This is the definition given by Charles E. Skinner, that education psychology deals with the behavior of human beings in educational situations. When we study the human behavior in educational setting, that is the branch which deals all this process is educational psychology. Friends, educational psychology is a behavioral science with two main references: human behavior and education. So if I quote here the word of E.A. Peel, that educational psychology is the science of education. And educational psychology helps the teacher to understand the development of his pupils, the range and limits of their capacities, the process by which they learn, and the social relationship which they develop is the educational psychology. This is the word of E.A. Peel. Thus, we can say that the application of psychological principles in the education is the educational psychology. See some more points about the educational psychology. Educational psychology is concerned primarily with the understanding, the process of teaching and learning that take place within the formal environment. Here, the meaning of formal environment is our classroom. The teaching learning process which happens inside the classroom, and the understanding the process of teaching and learning is the educational psychology. The developing ways of improving those methods of pedagogical methods of teaching and learning. For improving those methods, if we apply the principles of psychology, that branch of that applied branch is educational psychology. Friends, the educational psychology covers important topics. What are the different topics which covers by education psychology? Is learning theories, the very important things, the learning theories, teaching methods, motivation, cognitive, emotional and moral development, and parent-child relationship. These etc. These are the various topics which covers by the educational psychology. It is the scientific discipline. The educational psychology is a very scientific discipline that address the question. What are the different questions? Why do some students learn more than others? And what can be done to improve the learning? What a teacher can do to improve the learning in the classroom, and what are the different methods which are effective for the teaching? So these are the questions which are answered by the educational psychology. Here I am giving whatever we have seen, the different points about the education psychology. If we want to summarize all those points, we can say like that: education psychology is an applied discipline which combines the two different fields of education and psychology. It is the scientific study of human behavior by which it can be understood, predicts, and directed by education to achieve the goals of life. With the help of education psychology, a teacher can modify behavior of students, they can control behavior of students, and with the help of educational psychology, a teacher can predict the behavior of students. That is very important thing for a teacher to understand the educational psychology. If you understand the meaning of educational psychology, definition of educational psychology, we can move to the next point, that is nature of education psychology. If we see the nature of education psychology, the nature of education psychology is like any other pure science subject or any other pure social science subject. Therefore, education psychology is a science. Studying the nature of education psychology, the subject, this discipline is a science. What is science? You know that science is a systematic body of knowledge which is based on facts, evidences, principles, theories. Similarly, the education psychology is a scientific knowledge. The facts, the theories, the principles of education psychology can also be verified, can also be repeated, can also be evidence-based, and that can also be applied in any situation by any person, by any time, which happens in the science. Therefore, we can say that education psychology is a science. Like other natural sciences like the physics, chemistry, biological science. This is also our natural science because we do study of education psychology in a natural setting. Natural setting is our classrooms. Natural settings is our field. We do the same type of field study. Hence, we can say that this is a natural science. Education psychology is a social science also because in a class, students have a group of students. They having the group dynamics. Some students, the students having interpersonal relationship among the different friends. In the classroom, we know that some students are star of class. Some students, most of the students having their friends, their peers. Some students, and very few students also we can find in a class which are isolated. And these isolated students require help of mentors, help of teachers. So we can say that education psychology is a social science because we study the group dynamics, the intersocial relationship. The classroom is not isolated, that is interlinked with the school. A school is a miniature of the society and is part of the society. There is a relationship between the parents and the school, childs. There is a relationship between the various student relationship, the student teacher relationship, teacher parents relationship, principals teachers relationship. So this all the study is comes under the social science category. While studying the education psychology, we can say that this is a social science also, like a natural science. In the nature of education psychology, we can say that this is a positive science. Why this is a positive science? Because it is based on the facts, principles, experiments, evidences, whatever we do inside the science. It's positive science, it's a natural science. Education psychology is an applied science. The principles, theories, facts of education psychology are applicable in the classroom. They are applicable in the teaching learning situations. They are applicable in different methods of teaching. They are applicable in different pedagogies. They are applicable in solving the various problems of the students. They are applicable in solving the various problems of the education. Therefore, we can say that education psychology is a developing or growing science. While doing action research, every teacher can find out the different solution of the different problems by using the different tactics of education psychology, and he can able to set a different way of solve the problems of the students. So hence here we can say that education psychology is a developing science and it's a growing science. It's a natural science, it's an applied science, it is also social science, it's a natural science, and it's true science. This is all about the nature of educational psychology. So, if you allow, we can move to the next point of our lecture, that is scope of educational psychology. What are the scope? The main points in the scope of education psychology, we can categorize the scope of education psychology on the main points. The important part of the scope of education psychology is the learner. The learner is a student. Whatever the characteristic of learner we study in the education psychology comes under they are very important. Like the learner having the characteristic of their developmental characteristic of the learner, the different way of studying, way of reading, way of learning, their interest, their creativity, their intelligence. These, if we, whatever the different factors we are studying about the individual children, that is the part of the important part is the learner. The characteristic of the learner, the different questions related to learner, what learner should, how learner will learn, how a child can learn in a better way, how the studies can be made more enjoyable, how the classroom learning can be made more simple. So these questions about the learner characteristic. So when we talk about the scope of education psychology, the important point is the learner. Second important point is the learning experiences. Learning experiences are, while the teaching learning process, the various experiences pursued by the learner through lecture, through demonstration, through discussion, through laboratory experiments, through field study. He learn also from the society, he learn also from the home. So whatever the learning experiences gained by the students come under this category of the learning experiences. How these learning experiences make more effective, which helps children to understand the concept more effectively, more accurately. This is the question of education psychology, and it's a very important scope, the learner and the learning experiences. The third important area of scope of education psychology is the learning process. How learning happens, the different points, remembering, forgetting, how the different methods of learning, study habits, that all comes under the learning processes. And it is the third scope of education psychology. And the scope next point is learning situation or the environment. This is very important. Environment of learning, because the learning is affected by its environment. If you recall, what type of environment you have got during your classes, while sitting in the classes, the different factors which affect the environment. The important thing are your building structure, your benches, blackboard. These all are the part of environment. Climatic condition, fan and other facilities, class size. If class size is more, it affects the environment. Climatic conditions like if your school building is not proper, the water is coming out from the roof, the cleaning is not proper, there is no hygienic condition in the classroom, it is the part of environment. It definitely affects the learning situations. Learning is not conducive if the environment is not conducive. If intervening variables, that means the outside sounds, a bus sound, a market sounds are coming inside the classroom, so that environmental situations, if not controlled, learning would not be very effective because they are intervening in the process of the learning. The much sound outside from the classroom, or the psychological condition of the child is not proper, or psychological condition of the teacher is not proper. If the classroom situations are not good, the class size is more, or the benches are not good. This all comes under the process of the learning process. The learning situation, the environment. The next important point in scope of education psychology is the teacher. Teacher is a very important part of teaching learning process. In the beginning, I said that it depends on the teachers to make a simple topic very complex or complex topic very simple for their students. If a teacher is very systematic in nature, he knows the various principles of education psychology and he able to apply those principles inside the classroom, the class is definitely enjoyable for the students. And the student will not feel heavy while after the class. And they will feel very that all the concepts they need not to study much more for understanding because all things are clear in their mind. So such type of teachers actually apply the principle of education psychology during their lecture or during their demonstration or whatever the process, they apply activity based learner based process inside the classroom. Therefore, whatever the characteristic of a teacher that comes under the scope of education psychology, the mental characteristic of teacher, their content mastery, their way of presentation, their systematic presentation, their choosing of the different type of pedagogy, all these affect the learning process or the learning effectiveness, academic achievements, understanding, comprehension of the students. These factors related with those achievement of the students or the various factors of achievement of a learner. Let us go to the methods of educational psychology. What are the different methods of studying educational psychology? The important methods of studying educational psychology are the observation method, experimental method, case study method, introspection method, survey method or differential method. One by one, we are going to see in the detail what are the different methods and how the educational psychologists apply these methods inside the classroom. The important method is introspection. One is the important method is introspection. What we do in the introspection? Introspection actually the subject that means the person who are doing the responding their behavior. We give them to express their feelings by writing something. Writing something, we may give them a situation, we may give them to write their life history, we give them to any another situation where they are responding. So this is the introspection. Introspection actually the student or the subject writes about their feelings, how they perceive the things, and ultimately they express in front of psychologists their problems. The educational psychologist then able to interpret the cause of their problems, the psychological cause of the different problems of the education setting with the help of introspection method. Introspection is a method of depends on the subject. If they avoid all the feelings on the paper or they gives all the expressions of their cause of their problems, then only the psychologist can help. But this is limitation of this introspection method. Sometimes subject not gives, he hide many information from the psychologist and he not gives the proper situations, he not express his feelings. So that the limits of the introspection method. The another important method is the observation method. Observation is a careful looking activities of a group or any individual. Observation is very important method. Generally, teachers apply this method while during their teaching. They individually observe each individual, and by their facial expression, a teacher can understand the student is learning or not, or his mind is inside the class or outside the class. He is feeling difficulty in the subject, or he is not feeling or she is not feeling any difficulty in comprehending the topic. So observation is a very important method. It can be done in the different situation, but the limitation of observation method that we only can see the overt behavior of any individual. The covert behavior is not possible to see. It's difficult to see during the observation. Psychologist can do that judgment also for covert behavior also. So while overt behavior when a student do, it's easy to observe carefully and then draw out some interpretation to conclusion that what are the cause of some problem which are related with education or related with the psychological aspects of individuals. So observation is a very important method, but it has also some limitations that if during the research or the sampling is not proper, the sampling error was there, if it's not truly representing the population, then it's possible that the results are not appropriate and it will not give the solution of the problem. But observation is a very important method. It's two types of observation: participant observation. In participant observation, what the experimenter do, they lives with that, they become the part of that group and they do the same activity what the group is doing. So during that, they understand more, they can take a more better and effective interpretation of the situation, the participant observation. And other side, they can go remain outside and can observe the situation. Nowadays, the observation can be done with the help of electronic devices like CCTV camera. So that can also be helpful in the observation of different individuals, sometimes in the classroom, sometimes outside the classroom, sometimes in the field. It also helps to solve the educational problem of the students. The next important method of education psychology is a case study method. What is case study method? Case is maybe an individual, maybe an institute where an in-depth study was taken out, where we do the in-depth study, a detailed study of an individual. For example, I can give you example of mine. During my B.Ed, I did one case study of one child. The child is very problematic in class. That creates a lot of problem for every teacher. Teacher feel very difficult to manage their classes. That child create a lot of indiscipline, misbehaving. So my objective to do case study. What are the reasons for this type of behavior of that student? I did certain psychological testings. Then I went to every individual which are related with that child. I talk with their friends, I talk with their parents, I talk with the non-teaching staff, teaching staff, principal, then the different relatives, the neighbor of that child, and try to find out the root of the cause of that problem of that child, and then we can start the remedies or the treatment for that problematic child. The case study can be done with any problem. If some institute having any class having some problem, the whole class may be a case, or whole school may be a case, or any individual can be maybe a case. But in case study, a very detailed study is required, and we can draw the conclusion, the cause of the problem after the result of the detailed study, and it is very helpful in doing the solution of education psychology. The next important method is introspection. Introspection, what we do in introspection? Introspection we already discussed that the individual will write what if something test happen, if it given a certain test to us individual, then they write introspection, that what they feel, what they are feeling during that test, and that on the with the help of that introspection we can find out some conclusion. If the subject gives that they are not happy, they are feeling difficulties, they are having certain problems, if they give in a written form or in oral form, that is the result of introspection, where a person can individually give his feelings, his problems, whatever in the mind which he wants to give. The next important method of educational psychology is the survey method. What is survey? Survey, actually we do the field study where we collect the data from individuals door to door, or we give the questionnaire, we use the scale to individual, then we take out the information and then we analyze it. The survey is a very important differential method in educational psychology. Generally in social sciences we do the survey. In census we have seen that people will come at our home and do the survey. They have their checklist where they do the study of that what is available at your home, which type of your home, number of family members, what is their different income data. These are their educational qualification of different members. These all are the type of survey. So here the survey is a very important method of collecting data and studying the educational psychology. So we have seen here the different methods of education psychology. There are observation method, experimental method. In experimental method, what we do? In experimental method or clinical method, actually we do certain experiments. In educational setting, if I want to apply a new way of teaching to the children, I can do experiment. I have to take two different group or two different class or two different section of the same class. I will give the new teaching method, I will teach with the new teaching method to one group, and I will not teach, or I will teach with the same traditional method to the another class. This is the one of the experiment if I want to do in education setting. That one group is getting the treatment. Treatment, that means they are studying with some innovative method of teaching. Another group is studying with the same method of teaching or traditional method of teaching. And if we give pre-test to both the groups and post-test to both the groups, and ultimately after calculation and analyzing the data, if we apply statistical techniques, we can able to find out whether our method of teaching is effective or not effective. So this is a simple example of experimental method. Lot of experiments have been done in field of education, and regularly this methods is available to apply a small group or big group to draw the conclusion that which technique, which principle, which theories are applicable in field of education and how much they are effective. So friends, here we have seen the different methods of educational psychology, that are observation method, experimental method, case study method, introspection method, and survey method. Now we are going to talk about the application significance of education psychology for us, or for teacher, for students, what are the importance, what are the significance of studying educational psychology. So we are going with the different points that the first significance of this studying education psychology is to study the developmental characteristic. The different stages of development of any individual are the childhood, adolescent, adulthood. So what in education psychology, we have a better understanding about which stage having what type of the characteristic and what type of teaching method is required to teach which type age group of the children. If they are childhood, there are certain different methods. If they are adolescent stage, then there are different methods. If they are adulthood, the different methods are applicable. Because their developmental characteristics are different. Their choices are different, their likes, dislikes are different, their mental capabilities are different. In the childhood, the potentialities, the mental capabilities, the development is different. So whatever the whole science of this developmental study is a part of education psychology. We understand the developmental characteristic of individual. This is one of the significance of studying educational psychology. Another significance is the nature of classroom learning. In education psychology, we study about the nature of learning, the process of learning, the ways of the learning, the actual what setting is required for the learning, what are the environmental conditions are required for the learning. So that is the part of education psychology which significantly affect the process of learning. Here, the next thing which is significantly we use for under the education psychology is to understand the individual differences. No two individuals are the same in the classroom. The different students sitting in your classroom, every student is unique. They have the different characteristics, they have different physical characteristics, they have different psychological characteristics, different social characteristics, their different emotional characteristics. So all this affect their learning process. The first important thing which a teacher study in education psychology is to understand the individual differences and then accordingly modify their instructions inside the classroom. Some students are genius, some are slow learners, some are average type of students, some are backward students. So these all the different categories are the different characteristic of the individual differences. So understanding insight of individual difference is important application of education psychology in education, in teaching learning process. We understand different methods of teaching in education psychology. What are the different methods of teaching? Generally, we see the lecture method, generally we see the demonstration method, discussion method. Which method is more effective for which group of students? That we get idea in education psychology. We study about the different methods, different teaching techniques, different teaching methodology, pedagogies for a teacher in education psychology, and a teacher get an insight of which technique is suitable for which group of students. To understand problems of children in education psychology, we understand the problems of children, the different mental problems, physical problems, social problems. In education psychology, a teacher study what type of problems are possible among the students and how to solve the problems of those students. The emotional problems, the mental problems, all this is the part of the application of education psychology. The knowledge of the mental health. Mental health and hygiene is a very important thing to know about the teacher. Have you heard about the case of suicide from the students? This is the problem of mental problem. Have you seen any case of stress, depression? That is all the cause of the mental problem among the students, and the education psychology gives an idea about how to help the students these emotional problems, and that the knowledge is important for a teacher, which they get from the education psychology. The knowledge about the mental health, the curriculum construction. Curriculum construction, what are the different psychological principles applied during the curriculum construction? The different principles of psychology are applicable during the construction of the curriculum, development of the curriculum, in the writing the textbooks, That which part will come first, which will come second, in what will be the way of presentation, what will be the way of sequence of the topics. That is all the hierarchy comes from the education psychology. It's very important part of psychology inside the education is curriculum construction. The measurement of learning outcome. Learning outcome is a very important thing that without learning outcome, there is no meaning of any course in the education setting. So, how to measure this learning outcome? This comes is a part of education psychology. What are the different methods of assessment, evaluation methods? How to measure and give the feedback to the students? Action researches in the classroom, how can be conducted is a part of education psychology. The next important point is guidance and counseling of the students, the career counseling, guidance to students, help among for their emotional problems. The inclusive education, how to provide inclusive education to the different categories, different strata of the children is part of education psychology. How to develop a positive attitude among the students is also the part of education psychology, because attitude plays a very important role. If a psychology gives an idea how to develop a positive attitude, the adolescent stage, the childhood stage is the stage where a child built up their career. They can go in the right path or they can deviate from the wrong path. That is the responsibility of teacher to take them to the right path in the society. And this idea they gave from by after developing a positive attitude among the students. And it's understanding of the group dynamics. The group dynamics happens in the classroom. There are different groups in the classroom. How to synergize those dynamics among the different groups. How to make them harmonious development of those inside the different groups having the different characteristics. They have the pairs, they have the stars, they have the chain of relationship. So these group dynamics to be understood by the teacher, and after understanding the group dynamics, the teacher can do a better instructions in the classroom. So this is very important. Democratic administration, democratic way of teaching learning aids. By using teaching learning aids, learning is more effective. That we all know. So teacher, which type of learning aid use in the class? Is it chart? Maybe it's model? It's maybe PowerPoint? Maybe a video? Whatever that those things which is applicable in the classroom, that should be known by the teacher. The timetable is an important part of any academic activity. So which period to be kept first, which period to be put after the lunch. So that all the part of the psychological connections. So the teacher should know about the how to prepare a timetable. That is part comes under the on the basis of the psychological principles. The timetable should be prepared on the basis of the environment, psychological situation of a child. The co-curricular activities for all-round development, co-curricular activities are very important to how to put the co-curricular activities in the academic calendar, in the timetable. That is the important aspect of education psychology. We get an idea about the innovative pedagogy in the classrooms. We get an idea about the how to arrange textbooks, how to write the textbooks to the curriculum developers. That all ideas they get from the education psychology. So here we studied in this lecture about the meaning, definition of educational psychology, then the nature of education psychology, different methods of education psychology, and in last we talk about the significance of the educational psychology. Thank you very much for listening this lecture.